All right, welcome back once again, everybody. I'm Don Seifert. It's the Dr. Tree Fruit and Don podcast. It is Thursday, October 2nd. I am here with Dr. Kari Peter. Say hi, Kari.
Hi there.
Dr. Greg Krawczyk. Say hi, Greg.
Hello, everyone.
And Dr. Sean Kumar. Say hi, Sean.
Hello, everyone.
So it seems like today might be a pretty quick update, even though we haven't talked in a while. It's been pretty dry. So I know, Kari, you said you don't have a ton necessarily to talk about. But we will start with Sean. And Sean, I guess you probably want to give us an update, kind of where we're at on harvest and where things are moving along.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Yeah, following up on what Don said, I think it's been very dry. We had one or two showers, once a week or something last week and this week. And so that has given us some respite. But the lack of water has had effects on sizing, fruit sizing, especially towards our mid varieties. We are seeing some issues in sizing, but overall, this year still seems to be a very good crop year for apples in general in Pennsylvania. And I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of where the season are. Most people are still finishing up picking their reds, and they should be done this week, or some people might have finished last week. Some people might finish next week, but we're closing in on finishing up the reds, and we're slowly moving towards some of the later varieties. And so I just wanted to quickly touch base on our maturity reports and see where some of the varieties are at. In Adams County, we tested EverCrisp, which is currently at a start of 5. So they are ready to be harvested. In fact, I think it's best to harvest them now before you have something like a rain shower, especially after such a long period of drought. Then they Evercrisp is one of those varieties that is prone to cracking. It is better to harvest them slightly earlier between starch index of 4 to 5 max. Don't let it go past 5. And so it's important to harvest Evercrisp. It's probably going to be 2 or 3 picks for Evercrisp because only the first pick is ready, as far as we've seen in one or two orchards. That there seems to be a big gap between the first pick of Evercrisp and then the following picks. So just to be aware that you might not be ready for Evercrisp now, or some orchards Evercrisp was ready even last week. But those first pick apples it's very important to pick them now because in Adams County in the orchard we tested, they were already at a starch index of 5. Uh, uh, Good size, like they were 3 inches, a little bit over 3 inches, and the color development was not as much, so it was only at 50%. So the natural inclination is to wait for the color to develop in Evercrisp because we want better color. And so the natural tendency is to wait, and the fruit will also then increase its maturity, and it'll be sometimes it can reach 6, which at that point it is over mature. Although it can still store for a few months, Evercrisp can store for a few months just in regular cold storage. It's important to keep note that they might not store well in for longer than January, longer than if you want them to store that long. So it's important to harvest them at the right stage. Although this is one of those varieties that is notorious for waiting for color development in order to pick your apples. So Evercrisp is one of those varieties where you can try some of the color improvement techniques. One is extend day that you could use like 3 to 4 weeks before harvest, and and so that is something that has been done in Evercrisp and has been shown that it really helps improve color so that you're not waiting for them to develop color and in the meantime losing storage capacity for those apples. Now, moving on to Aztec Fuji, which was the second variety that we tested in Adams County. They seem to be moving along quite fast as well. When they were tested on 21st of September, they were only at a starch index of 3.3, but they've moved to a starch index of 5.2 when they were tested a few days ago. And so the Aztec Fujis, again, are moving quite fast, and they have really good bricks. And the red color again is at a similar stage as the EverCrisp, a little bit higher at close to 60%. So there is still room for color development in Aztec Fuji. But the same, I'm emphasizing this because we are noticing a lot of this happening in Adams County and surrounding counties that where we are growers are being forced to wait for color development while sacrificing on the maturity. And so this is again another example where they're already at a starch index of 5, Aztec Fuji, at least the first pick is. And so it's important to harvest them depending on how you plan to store them. It's important to think about that. And Fuji is something that, it's good to be harvested at 4, maximum 5, and they should be harvested by then. And so it's important again to think about ways in which you can increase color for Fuji. And with Nittany, they're still at 2.8 starch, and so there's still some time for them to develop. And they're still maintaining a firmness of 20 pounds, and so there's still some time. Fuji's also has a decent firmness of about 18 to 19 pounds. And so they still have, if you absolutely have to wait for a week for them to develop more color, I think it should be fine, especially for short-term storage, 2, 3 months. I think that should be fine. But if you're storing for longer, especially past January, you really have to pay attention to the starch and firmness to make sure that you're harvesting at the right time, irrespective of whether they've developed that color or not. So that was for Adams County. Now, excuse me, in Berks, where Don, you tested similar varieties, EverCrisp and Fuji. Similarly, actually, this is a funny story. When Don brought the starch index values last week, this was 22nd of September, the starch index was approximately 5.5 or to 5.8 for EverCrisp, and I was shocked. And in fact, I told Don, "Are you sure this is EverCrisp?" And then he confirmed, yes, this was EverCrisp. So it seems like there is an early crop of EverCrisp that's almost 2 to 3 weeks ahead of the rest of the apples on the tree. That could relate to when we had the frost, or also relate to thinning practices that could have resulted in this sort of a wide difference between the first pick and the following picks. But just a good example to keep note of some of your apples where you're expecting to harvest them sometime in the second week, third week of October, but they might be ready 2, 3 weeks earlier, just because of the conditions of that year, at least for the first pick. And so, on average, EverCrisp, it seems to be hovering around 4 to 5 starch index. And so it's good to keep track of that, as well as Aztec Fuji, where it is at a similar stage to Adams County, really, in terms of firmness and, sorry, in terms of starch index. And so these two varieties are something to keep note of. Granny Smith was also tested in Berks. And so we're seeing that they still have some time to develop. They have a starch index of 2.5. They still have probably a few weeks. And depending on where you plan to use it for storage. So if they are for long-term storage, then the grannies need to be harvested somewhat soon, like sometime next week, week after. And if they are more for short-term, within the next few months, you still have some leeway for Granny Smith. And I did want to mention specifically a little bit more about EverCrisp. The other issue that we're noticing in EverCrisp and is water core. So water core is one of those physiological disorders that you could potentially see when you have a drastic change in the weather. For example, we've had such a dry period this August. Even though we had cool weather, we it was accompanied by dry weather because we didn't have any rain, and then we had 1 or 2 showers last week, this week, and even before. And so that kind of drastic change in the water status can result in the sudden accumulation of sugars in the fruit in a particular area, and then cause water core. And but it is if for EverCrisp, while there is some cause for worry, you don't have to worry too much, because sometimes the water core sort of dissipates during storage, because if it's given enough time, sometimes, and if it's not as severe, sometimes these sugars are able to dissipate into the surrounding surface. and surrounding parts of the fruit where the sugars are not concentrated. And so that diffuses over time, sometimes during storage. So just something to keep note of, especially if you have a rain forecast in say in a week or so, and you think that they're at a starch of four or five. The always the safest thing to do is to harvest them before, especially if you have had such a dry spell of so anything that is mature or over mature, especially like EverCrisp, they are prone to cracking. And so there is potential to see that. So it's just important to keep note of that. Aztec Fuji is being harvested in Adams County right now. And so we are still in the thick of harvest with some of our mid to late season varieties. And that's all I have as an update. Don, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I think we are good.
No, that sounds really good. Thanks for the update and the clarification on some of the stuff. And yeah, no, the conversation we had last week about the EverCrisp was really funny because I was like, no, I'm very confident that was an EverCrisp block, but I'll call him. And and yeah, sure
Yeah,
enough.
because I
So
couldn't believe that they were close to six. Six is basically over mature.
yeah,
And this was like 21st of September. And so this just shows like every year, depending on the thinning regimen, on when you get frost, sometimes you can have the first and second, third picks be so widely variable in Evercrisp.
yeah. So
Yeah. Okay.
cool.
Thanks.
Thanks. Dr. Krawcheck.
Oh well, it's October.
It is.
The reason I'm saying this is the weather, it's still not like in October. However, most of the insects are done with their activities for the season. I mean, one thing is that OFM will probably be active for some time. If we have at least like for this weekend, we're talking about 80s, back to 80s. So we might still see some OFM flying, but I think this is really something that should not really be of big concern unless there was a big problem earlier on. The only insect that actually will still benefit from those 80s or 70s in the weather is brown marmorated stingbug. Uh, the we are right now at the point when adults are trying to get as many resources as possible and get ready to survive the winter. Because of this, and because of the good quality food that they can find in the orchards, they basically can actually still cause damage. The bad thing about stingbug is that you might not see stingbug injuries up to 2 weeks after the injury actually happened. So you might start seeing injury right now, and if you do on some of the cultivars that you're harvesting, it means that the injury actually happened in sometime in mid-September. And the same since, again, I don't know how much we can trust the forecast, but right now it looks like for the next 2 weeks, the forecasts stay on the warm side with no rain and so on. So if some of those cultivars are expected to be in the orchard, for another 2, 3 weeks, and you either trap and see that the BMSB is around, or you know from the past, from the history that this block or that block was especially prone to show the injuries, it's still possible to control them with insecticides. I mean, most of the effective insecticides have 14, 21 days PHI, which I think it's a little bit too long, and especially what Sean was mentioning about the harvest coming slightly earlier than normal and somehow being unpredictable. But if you really need to control BMSB and you feel because they are close to woods or you can see a lot of them, most neonicotinoids, Aceil, Belay, Admire Pro, they have 7 days PHI. So those are really the only tools that are left to control brown marmorated stingbug adults. We have this project funded by SHAP this year where we're trying to again go back to nets, the insecticide treated nets, and we started it late, but we still have those nets in the field. And this week counts are 300 dead adult stink bugs per net since last week. So this tells you that some locations, and this is not everywhere, because we also have location when we're talking maybe 10, maybe 15 per trap, but some locations are getting those 200, 150, 300 adults per week. So it means they are out there, they are feeding, they're feeding very actively because, like I said earlier, they have to get enough food, build enough fat bodies so they can survive the winter, so they can be active in the spring. But it's a really judgment call and how much you worry about it and what is the purpose for the fruit. You know, fresh market is one thing, processing might be another thing. The shortest PHIs is 7 days. And again, those are only neonicotinoids. Aceil, Belay, Admire Pro. So those are the things to think about eventually when you have time dealing with it when at the same time you are harvesting fruit. Another thing I want to mention today, and this is just to clarify something. Back in 2024, when we learned in the spring that yes, we can start using chlorpyrifos again, there were those basically four formulations that were still on the market that were available. And they, at the time, EPA ruling was that remaining remnants can be used until June 30th, 2025. So what it means is if you still have it, most likely it is illegal to use it. I'm using the phrase most likely because I was just trying to find the label on the web and there is not a single one left that you can find on the web, which kind of suggests that the June 30th was never extended and Lordban is no longer available. Saying this, there was another ruling at some point, but I didn't get to it this morning when I was trying to prepare for this call, that was saying that something might be available longer. I will try to clarify it and make sure before our next update. And so we'll have the final update about chlorpyrifos. But if any one of you still have pilot chlorpyrifos 4E, lambda phos, or warhawk, just make sure that it's still legal to use it. And at this moment, I don't have this information. The last information I had say it is illegal to use it because the remnant is supposed to be used before June 30th of this year. So those are the only two updates I have about insect right now. Uh, I don't know if there are any question, Don, or anyone else.
No, that was I think the chlorpyrifos kind of clarification, because I know we had touched on that last time we had talked. I think that's like a super, super helpful clarification because I know that was kind of muddied last time and
And again, I will try to have this final. I will basically check with someone from the pesticide office at EPA or USDA to make sure that we understand it correctly because
mm,
that was out, back in, out again. Then there
yeah,
was a timing, and at this moment, I don't know what is the final version of it.
yeah,
But I will have it for the next update. So,
awesome. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And last but not least, Carrie.
Oh, well, so I think the last time we had an episode was in August, I believe. And so in August, at least in Adams County, we had a whopping total of 2.18 inches. And I know at least half of that came one day in the middle of the month. And then in September, we had even less rain, and that was 1.59. Again, this is in Adams County. And again, 1 inch of that came all in one day. And so, as far as where we stand disease wise, I would still encourage growers to make sure that any fruit that is destined for some kind of length of storage, that they should hopefully have a semi quasi fresh fungicide spray on it right before they harvest. And I'm thinking of some of these later varieties like Aztec Fuji, even EverCrisp, Pink Lady that's coming up. Even though we haven't had a lot of rain, that fungicide that you may have applied in August and you feel like you can really stretch your fungicide sprays now due to the lack of rain, it is still going to degrade and break down because UV is a great degrader of pesticides. So I would highly encourage you and also extend the advocacy beyond the packers because I know the packers want their growers to have a fungicide spray close to near harvest. So the fungicide sprays that are ideal are stuff like Maravon that has a 0-day PHI, Luna Sensation is a 14-day PHI, Flint Extra is a 14-day PHI. The strobilurin, the FRAC 11 in those products is pretty potent when it comes to suppressing a lot of these storage rots that could possibly pop up, that could possibly be latent. And that's what I'm really concerned about is some of these later varieties going into storage, possibly with not much on them, based on what happened early in the season. So even though it's been dry in August and September, I think the damage may have been done with regards to any kind of rot having a possible latent infection. And so we had a very wet May, June, and July. And so then, of course, the spigot just sort of turned off. But just as a word to the wise and, try to get out there. I have not heard many sprayers out there in Adams County. I mostly see a lot of the bins in the orchard, so I can definitely understand why people aren't spraying. But uh, I would encourage you to um, I would encourage you to make sure that you have something on your trees. With that said, I right before we started today's podcast, we were talking about some varieties having potential cracking, like on the shoulders near the stem, and possibly rot starting there. Another reason to possibly have a fungicide on the fruit to sort of limit that potential of rots. And this is especially important if any of your fruit's destined for processing, especially if you are still wanting to move those fruit that could potentially have cracking that may not be ideal for fresh market. It's going to processing, all the more reason to make sure you have some kind of fungicide on those fruits. So I mean, it's been pretty quiet. It's been pretty slow. We've been rating our field trials that we've been doing as far as product trials. And I am seeing a lot of really unusual spots that has given me pause. Some of it, I think it might be late season apple scab, it may be something else. Not quite sure yet. We're actually growing some of this fungi out to see what's going on. So I don't know if there's something new that this season has brought. We shall see. But that's about it as far as my update. But to sort of follow up on the conversation of the pesticides and pesticide label registrations, just to kind of give a quick update of what I know about your Xyram, your Thyram, your Furbam, your Mancozeb, your Captan, all those broad spectrum fungicides have been under re-registration review over the last 2 years. And all I can say is that nothing has been finalized like a final ruling for anything. Xyram, Thyram, and Furbam have been proposed to have the registrations revoked, but there's nothing finalized about that. So, and that's in the last month, and because when we were in the midst of revamping and updating the tree fruit production guide for the next round of edits. I basically included in everywhere how everything is as of August 2025, things are basically proposed to be canceled. I do know that Xyram is still out there and that you are still able to be using it this year, but that's about it. That's all I know. Nothing's been finalized. And as far as when we're supposed to hear something official, the EPA said the end of this year, maybe the beginning of 2026. So time will only tell. So the second I know, I will make sure to put up an update about those broad spectrum fungicides. As far as what we know at the moment, I know Mancozeb and Captan definitely were being scrutinized a little more closely, especially for apples with regards to maybe more PPE or additional PPE, reentry times being extended, pre-harvest intervals being extended, and such that. But nothing's been mentioned, nothing has been updated. So unfortunately, that is where things stand with those broad spectrum fungicides. But just stay on alert, and hopefully in a few months we will have something official to report. That's it.
Okay, sounds good. And I know this is probably going to be our last one for a little while, until we kind of do an end of season thing, because I know Kari, you and Greg said that it's going to be, hopefully, fingers crossed, pretty quiet for you guys
Well,
until
yeah, hopefully we'll see. I mean, it's calling for, I see rain is forecasted for the 6th, I think, but that's just one day.
one day,
Um,
one
But
single day of
I will also say that people should still be mindful of the conditions because you just never know. And, it might be dry the rest of the month and it might
yeah,
be a repeat of September and August. So,
yeah. So, but we're gonna do like a big kind of overview of the season in November, and yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to that. And I those of you that signed up to do a grower Q&A, that is still on the docket. I just need to actually sit down and get a hold of you guys. So, cool. Thanks everyone for jumping on here this morning. I will try and get this edited really quick so folks can be listening to this. And thank you guys so much for jumping on, and thanks everybody for listening. So say goodbye, everybody.
see you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.